All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to day two. Welcome to Tuesday. I hope the first day went well for you yesterday, and I hope you found all your classes and met all your instructors, and I hope you're happy with them so far. Um, Yesterday, we'll just review very quickly. So yesterday we went over the syllabus, and maybe I'll just do a quick recap of that today, and then we'll kind of get into some of the social justice stuff. Again, it's going to be sort of a light day today. We'll just sort of take our time and ease into it, and I think it's important to understand what we'll talk about over the next couple days because it sort of serves as a background to this course in terms of the way we look at things, but it's also a little bit tricky to understand in some ways, and so we'll just kind of take our time as we go through it, just because it can be a little complicated. It is important, and it's still day two. We don't want to strain ourselves on the second day, right? So. Let's see who's here. So Sean is here. Good morning, Sean. Oasis here. Good morning to you. Zartaj is here. Good morning, Zartaj. Ben is here. Good morning, Ben. And Basil is here. Good morning, Basil. So, yes. That said, or wait. Maybe I'll do this. Maybe I will do this. So, if you are looking for the if you're looking for the syllabus for this course, and you may want to look at it, you'll find it in Student Portal. If you go to this course, you'll see a little tab that says Course Documents, and in Course Documents I've posted the syllabus, and I'll post all of the lecture slides as we go forward, okay? And so you'll see the syllabus posted there. It's got sort of the important information on it about the course, and my email address is there, at least I hope it is. Yes, it is. It's got a quick description of the course, which I had in my slides yesterday, a little summary of the learning outcomes, the sort of skills that we're supposed to be practicing in here, so we talked about those yesterday. I gave you on the syllabus, there's kind of a rough map of what we'll cover in the course. So you can see here we have a couple of we'll have a couple days on sort of basic theory and knowledge. We'll talk about culture and socialization, which is very important. Talk about what oppression and power are, and then we'll go into some specific expressions of oppression or inequality. So I have a little unit on ableism. Then we'll move into sexism, racism, religious oppression, classism, and then we'll be done. I'm going to try and build out some of those later units. Religious oppression and classism are kind of small at the moment. It's very easy to spend a lot of time talking about sexism and racism. They're very kind of big, kind of present oppressions that people are talking a lot about, and so it's very easy to spend a lot of time on it, and we probably will spend some time on it, but I'll try to carve out some time at the end for those other types of oppression as well. The other thing I'll mention here is that this is kind of a rough guide of where we'll be. So you can see here, what does it say? Yeah, so it says week 7 we may start on sexism. It will be around there, but sometimes things take a little longer, sometimes we move quicker, sometimes there's an interesting thing to talk about that takes us a little longer. Good morning. Sometimes we need a little more time for something. It's so the dates aren't exact. I kind of try to move as fast or as slow as we need to. So they're just rough. They're just rough dates. We went over this yesterday. The sort of grade breakdown. So there's 10% for kind of showing up, and I mean showing up in terms of physically being in the room, but also showing up in terms of paying attention, being engaged, answering questions, asking them, being part of what's happening here, right? That's all part of showing up, right? We'll have some assignments that we'll talk about a little bit later. We'll have a final assignment, which I said I'm still I have an idea of what I would like to do, but I'll tell you more about it once I have it fully kind of conceptualized. And then we'll have a bunch of quizzes. And so probably one every 2 weeks or so. If we have 5 quizzes, we have 13 weeks, one every 2 weeks, give or take. So we talked about that. There's some other information on the syllabus as well, which you may want to have a look at. Nothing, nothing out of the ordinary, or nothing that you wouldn't think would be there. Okay. Ready to jump in? Yes? No? Maybe? We're not awake yet? Check back with me in an hour to an hour and a half? Sure, why not? Well, I'll tell you why not, because we can't do that. Let me just, okay, here we go. So, from the syllabus yesterday, I put this in front of you and I said that social justice is kind of I think it's a very important course. Good morning, Victoria. So, I think it's a very important course. There are some who would kind of put the types of classes like science and math and engineering, some people would put those above, right? Some people would say that those kind of classes are more important, that you should really pay more attention to your math and your science, that you should really, these are the important courses. And courses like social justice are kind of like, they're soft, right? They're filler. They're not as kind of real. They're not as kind of rigorous as real science is. But I would argue that that's not entirely true. Certainly math and science and things like that are very important. But the problem with math and science is that, once you have technology and technological innovations and technological power, science doesn't really tell you what to do with it, right? Science just kind of tells you what the rules of the universe are, and then you can invent things based on that. But it doesn't really tell you how to use that. It doesn't really tell you how to build a society. It doesn't really tell you how you can make that society necessarily better, right? And so we can live in a world with lots of technological marvels, which of course I think we do, but there's another side to it, which is learning to understand how to, what's the word I'm looking for? How to kind of apply those ideas in people's lives, right? And what makes people's lives better and what makes it worse, right? And science often, or at least hard science like math and physics and things like that, they don't really tell us that, right? They just tell us what we can do and what we can't do. But the sort of social sciences help us to understand what maybe we should do and what we shouldn't, right? So again, we're asking ourselves, what kind of society do we want to live in? And maybe what society do we currently live in is an important thing to understand first. And how can we work toward a better society, right? How can we create more opportunities, more equality for everyone, right? And in some ways it's a very simple question, and in some ways it's not quite so simple, but maybe we'll try to pull that apart as we go forward. Let me just see. These are from my syllabus, so that's okay. I'm going to jump through those. Oh, that's why sorry. This is where I want to be. That's where I want to be. Okay, so this is kind of what we're talking about now, is what social justice is, why should we care about it, how can we understand it, right? So this is, good morning, come on in. For our purposes here, this is kind of what we'll say that social justice is. If we are interested in social justice, if we kind of believe in it, these are 3 of the things that we believe to be true, okay? And again, you may personally not believe these things, but for the purposes of this class, we'll believe that this is what we believe. So number 1, that all people in society deserve and should have access to the same rights and resources, right? So people who are interested in social justice don't feel that some people get certain rights and some people don't. They don't believe that resources are only available for a few, that everyone should have access to the things that they need, right? Doesn't necessarily mean that everyone has equal things all the time, right? But it does mean that people have access to them, right? People are able to get resources, to sort of gain opportunities, and we want people to be able to do that. And we certainly don't want them to be able, or we certainly don't want them denied those opportunities or resources based on part of their identity. And we'll get to that in just a few minutes, okay? Again, people who believe in social justice embrace human rights, right? The idea that, again, we all deserve certain treatment simply for being human, right? So we don't have to earn those rights. We don't have to demonstrate, something in order to get them. We all just have them because we are human beings, right? And we all deserve a certain standard of basic treatment, and we all deserve our needs to be met at a certain level, right? People who believe in social justice believe in that. And people who believe in social justice believe that where we see inequalities, we should work to reduce them, right? And I think I don't know what other people think about this. We probably will never live in a society that is entirely equal, right? And I'm not even sure that that's a good thing necessarily, but what we do need to do is make sure that we minimize inequalities, particularly where social groups are involved. But we'll get to that in just a second, okay? So far so good? Everyone okay? All right. So, whoops. Why should we care about this stuff? Okay? Because there are some people who do not, right? Some people hear about social justice and they just kind of roll their eyes. Not Baja, because Baja's cool. I do. Some people don't really care about it. Some people kind of roll their eyes and go, oh, social justice warriors, here we go, right? Some people have that reaction to it. And again, it is a complicated issue to talk about. And it's complicated because it's connected to a lot of things. It's connected to our ideas about how the world actually works, right? And this is an important part of culture. This is an important part of socialization. So all of us, we'll get to this in a little bit, all of us have been taught a culture, yes? Right? Yeah. We've all been taught a culture, and as part of that culture, we've been taught how the world works, right? How the world is. And, I think this is probably part of our parents' job, right? Our parents are teaching us, look, little Jessie or little Nicole or little Poom, when you grow up, you'll have to do this because this is how the world works, right? And our parents and our aunts and uncles and people around us are very good at kind of teaching us that, right? And how things are, and they should, right? That's part of their job. But kind of mixed into that, as we'll see, are some errors, some stereotypes, some ways that we kind of think things are that maybe they're not. But we'll get to that a little bit later. It's connected to ideology, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Does anyone know kind of, well, I guess I've kind of defined it there, haven't I? I was going to ask you to, but when we're talking about ideology, we're talking about big ideas that society believes to be true. Okay, can you think of an ideology just off the top of your head? Something that might. What's that? Is racism an ideology? Yeah, I think it probably is, right? I think the idea that race that exists and there's differences between races and we should do something about that. Yeah, that's an ideology. What else might be an ideology? What's that? Religion? Yeah, religions are ideologies as well, right? They are big ideas about how the world and society, and indeed the entire universe, how they work, right? So religions are ideologies, right? What's that? Socialism? Sexism? Yeah. Sexism, oppressions, yeah. Oppressions have their own ideologies mixed into them, yeah. Basil, what do you say?
Gender.
No, is that an ideology? I, I don't know that that's necessarily an ideology. They're part of culture for sure. They're definitely part of culture, and we'll get to that.
But not nowadays. Nowadays it's different. We don't follow the culture.
Sorry, say that again?
Like nowadays we don't follow the culture between genders. That's why. When it comes to gender,
When it comes to gender, you don't follow the culture?
they don't.
Oh, well, that's the thing, right? Is that well, and we'll talk about this a little bit later too, but cultures change, right? Cultures are not, cultures are, sometimes I think we think of something, culture that's something traditional, right? Something that doesn't change. But indeed, it's always, it's always changing, right? People's ideas and beliefs and the way they behave, the way they talk, the things they think are good or bad, all of those things are changing, right? If you came here, and some of you may have been here, but if you came to Canada, oh, I don't know, 2 years ago, you would not see anyone wearing a mask, right? And obviously there was no COVID at the time, but you wouldn't see anyone wearing a mask. But even if they were sick, they wouldn't wear one, right? And my understanding is that in China or other Southeast Asian countries, if you're sick, you wear a mask, right? That's a sort of a respectful thing to do, right? That's a normal thing to do. But here in Canada, that was never something we did. We never wore masks. Now, of course, we all do. And so I'm curious to see how culture will change after maybe we come out the other side of COVID, right? Will people wear masks when they're sick? I think they might. Will people still shake hands? I wonder, right? We used to shake hands quite a bit, right? Here in Canada, that was how you met people, you shook hands, but nobody's shaking hands now. And will they continue to shake hands when COVID is over? I don't know. People might not feel comfortable anymore. That little piece of culture might change, right? People might find a different way to greet each other. And you see that happening, right? You see people, bumping elbows, right? Or sort of kicking each other's feet, or the fist bump, right? We see people kind of changing those practices, right? So that's just a little slice, but it's a little piece of culture change. But yeah, culture is full of different ideologies, right? Communism is an ideology, right? It's connected to our values and morals, right? So social justice ideas are connected to what we think are things that we think are right and wrong, good and bad, right? The way things should be and the way things shouldn't be. We'll talk about this a little bit later too, that social justice and whether you care about it or not is very connected to who you are as a social person. And I don't mean, how much you like to talk to other people. As a social person, I mean who you are to society, right? Kind of where you fit in, what your kind of social identities are. And we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. I'll explain what that means, and it'll probably make more sense. It's connected to our positionality. That's a made-up word, isn't it? Even though, all words are made up, right? That's what Thor said. But that's a word that describes that, and I'll explain it in just a second. And so, as I say, as we go through this course, we'll have a better idea of how to kind of define why we should care about these things, okay? Because, again, some people care very deeply about social justice issues. Some people don't care at all. Some people pretend to care because that's the thing that you should do. But again, we'll talk about this and we'll sort of pull it apart. Okay. To understand this course and to kind of approach it, I want to put 3 things in front of you here. We're going to take what's called a critical approach to social justice. And so critical approaches are This is a critical approaches are, shoot, how do I define it in an easy way? When theories are defined as critical, they have a few things in common. And these are kind of the things that we will assume to be in common here. Okay? So, in looking at social justice from a critical stance, we're going to say these three things, and I'll explain them to you. Number one, we're going to look at our world from the idea that that society is stratified. Okay, so stratified is a fancy word that means it has layers, right? Strata, I think it's the Greek word for layer, if I remember. So when society is stratified, it has levels, it has layers, right? Some people are on the top, some people are on the bottom, right? And I don't think I need to explain that. I think we're all very familiar with the fact that some people in society have more than others, right? More money, more power, more prestige, right? More status, and some people have less, right? And we'll pay particular attention to the idea of where those strata exist and where they interact with social identities. So race, gender, sexuality, religion, all of those things, okay? We're going to assume, or we're going to believe, for the purposes of this course, that our perceptions of the world are not all the same. And I was talking about that yesterday with Victoria. I said Victoria is sitting at the back, and she is having a totally different experience of this class than I am, right? And number one, she's sitting in a totally different place. She sees the room differently. She hears things differently. And of course, she's a different person. And she has a different role, right? I have a certain role and Victoria has a certain role. So our experience of what's happening in here is different, right? And so our realities are a little bit different, right? Even though some people would like to assume, well, there's only one reality, right? We're all in this one reality together. Everything's the same. Critical social justice says that whether there is or isn't one reality, we all experience it a little differently. We all see it a little differently. We'll talk about that a little more in a minute. And finally, we'll talk about the idea that sometimes knowledge is counterintuitive. Now, if I asked you what that meant, what would you tell me? Counterintuitive. How about just intuitive? What does that mean? Something's intuitive, or if you're intuitive. What's that mean? Daniel, I feel like you know. No? No. I thought I was having like a mind reading moment. I was like, Daniel knows. Intuitive? Okay, Ben's going to try. Ben says working against yourself. Okay, maybe the counterpart. So counter, when something is counter or something, it's against, right? It's the opposite. Intuitive is something that you can kind of figure out on your own, something that you kind of just know, right? And so, it's kind of intuitive that, if I heard, a bunch of little things hitting the window outside, I probably wouldn't have to look. I could probably just know that it's raining, right? That's kind of an intuitive thing to know. If you hear those things hitting the window, you know it's raining, right? And there's lots of things that are just intuitive to us, right? We can very quickly figure them out on our own. Our brains are very quick at putting things together, and some things are just intuitive, right? Some things you just kind of know without having to really think about it. Things that are counterintuitive are things that they kind of go against that, right? So even though it may seem to you that this is the obvious answer and it's very easy to see, in fact, sometimes the real thing is not that. I'll give you an example very shortly because I feel like that's Not a good explanation, but I'll show you something that will help us with that, I think. Right. The other part of this is that we're taking a critical stance. And I don't mean we're going to criticize things, right? But what I mean is we're criticizing, or we're being critical in that we're taking the approach that knowledge is something that is socially constructed, okay? And the idea of things that are social constructions will come up many, many times in this course because of the way that humans operate, okay? What's a really good example of something that is socially constructed? How about this? You don't have to take it out, but does anyone have money in your pocket? Okay, yeah. Okay, now we know who to rob later. If you have money in your pocket and you pulled it out, you would look at it and you would see, I don't know, maybe a $20 bill, right? Canadian $20 bill. They're made out of plastic, very annoying. They don't fold, they're slippery. Very annoying, right? Nobody likes them, but apparently they last a really long time, so they're cheaper. But nobody likes plastic money. Anyway, now if you pulled out that $20 bill, and I asked you how much is that $20 bill worth, what would you tell me? $20, right? Duh. Yeah, it's $20. But why is it worth that? It's been given that value by whom? By people. Yeah. So why is the $20 worth $20? Well, because that's what we all agree the value is, right? We all agree the value is $20, right? And so money, especially currency, especially dollar bills and things, they only have value because we all agree that they do, right? Can you do anything else with that $20 bill? Can you eat it? I wouldn't recommend it. What's that? You can buy things, but if you couldn't, but other than buying things, is there anything you can do with that? What? Maybe if you can roll it up and like snort drugs through it or something. I don't know. But that's really its own, like it has no other use, right? You can't eat it. It's not practical in any way. It's not a tool, right? You can't. There's nothing. It's totally worthless, right? The only reason the $20 bill has value is because we all say that it does, right? And things like, gold, for instance, gold has a lot of value as well, right? How much does it cost for an ounce now? $1,000 Canadian? And for an ounce of gold? It's expensive, right? Well, just an ounce even is very expensive. Never mind a whole brick. But yeah, but why is gold so expensive? Nah, it's not that hard. Yeah. Yeah, we think it's pretty, right? We think gold is pretty, right? And we like to make jewelry out of it, and therefore it is expensive. People give it value. As a metal, it's not that great. It's kind of soft, right? If you went back thousands of years, most people weren't building tools out of gold because gold is soft, right? If you had a knife made of gold, it would go dull really quick because gold is a soft metal. It doesn't tarnish very easily, which is nice, so it's useful that way. But it's not that uncommon, and it's not that useful for most things. But us humans think that gold is a really big deal, and so it is, right? And that's a common thing for humans around the world. We think something is a certain way, and therefore it kind of is, right? Because this is how we build our world. This is how we build our culture. This is how we build our society. We build our society on imagined ideas and imagined realities, okay? let me give you one more interesting example of something that exists because we say it exists. Okay. Columbia College is kind of like this. We'll call Columbia College an imagined reality. Okay. So, does Columbia College exist? Yeah, you all go to it, right? I work for it. Of course it exists. But what is it? What is Columbia College? It's an educational institution. It's in a building, but it's not the building. Because if we moved all of our stuff across the street, would we still have Columbia College? Yeah, right? It's not the building, right? So, is it the students? Yes. But then in 4 years, will it not be Columbia College anymore? No, it'll still be Columbia College, even though all of you will have graduated and moved on. We'll have new students, God willing, and and Columbia College will continue to exist. So it's not the building, it's not the students. Is it the teachers? No, because Columbia College has been around for 85 years, and I guarantee you I have not been here for all 85, right? Nor has anyone. Although we do have a few instructors who have been here for, oh gosh, like maybe 40 years. So some people have worked here a long time. But don't they get bored? I don't know. I've never worked at a place for 40 years. There was a counselor who retired. I think she retired about a year ago, and she started working here at Columbia College before I was born. Which I know sounds like a million years ago, and it kind of is. It kind of is a million years ago. But yeah, like I couldn't believe it when I saw her start date. I was like I was not born yet. And she was working, not in this building, but she was working here. So anyway, I'm getting off track. Columbia College is not the building, it's not the students, it's not the instructors. What is it? Yeah, it's a piece of paper, right? Somewhere in a government office somewhere is a little piece of paper that we have filed that says Columbia College is a thing, an institution, an entity, right? But that's all it is, right? There's just a little piece of paper somewhere that says that. And because that little paper says that, then Columbia College exists, right? Columbia College can recruit students, which it has. Columbia College can earn money, which it does. Columbia College can pay people and hire them, which it does. Columbia College can be sued. Please don't sue us. Columbia College can buy property, like this building and like this furniture. Columbia College can do all these things, but what is it? It's an imagined reality, right? It's a thing that we all pretend exists so that we can cooperate, right? And we do, right? Here we are, all of us in this room and tuning in online. Here we are getting what we need, right? You're getting an education and courses and credits. I'm getting paid, which I need to do, even though I love my job, but I still need to, pay the rent kind of thing. I have a job. We have people working downstairs in the administration office, and they have jobs, and they're taking care of stuff for us. Everybody's kind of cooperating and working together. And they're working together for or with or in Columbia College. But I ask you, does Columbia College exist the way that this table exists? No, right? We imagine Columbia College to be the building, but again, it's not, right? We imagine Columbia College to be the students or the instructors or both combined, but it's not really that either. It's imaginary, right? It's a thing that we create and we pretend that it's real. And again, human society and human cultures have all kinds of things like that. All kinds of things that we assume are real and tangible because they help us understand the world. They help us organize ourselves. They help us cooperate, right? And Columbia College is a perfect example of that thing, right? Something that we imagine to be kind of real, and it allows us to cooperate within that structure, which we do. But again, critical social justice theory has just that idea that knowledge is socially constructed, okay? And so the things that we know, the things that we believe, many of those things are true only because we believe them to be true, or because we all agree that they're true. And the things that we know and the things that we believe are connected to how power is distributed in our society, okay? So the people who have the power get to decide, to some degree, what is known and what is not known, okay? So if this was a Social Studies 11 class, for instance, I would be teaching you about Canadian democracy, right? So I would tell you what democracy is, and we would talk about how the Canadian political system works, and the legislature in Ottawa, and what Justin Trudeau's job is, and blah, 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 blah. I would tell you all of that stuff. Why would I be teaching you that and not communism? Well, that's my job. And who says it's my job? Yeah, and who tells Columbia College? The government. Yeah. So the curriculum that I teach comes from the government, right? And the government wants you to the government wants to create good democratic citizens. It doesn't want to create a bunch of communists, right? Like, we don't, that's not what we do here. We do democracy here. And so again, you're being taught democracy because that's what the government wants you to learn, right? And so again, the things that we know, there'll be more examples of this going forward, but the things that we know are connected with who has power in society, okay? And it doesn't mean that that's all we know, but the people in power have an ability to sort of determine what is known, what people learn, what people believe, to a degree, okay? All right, let me see what's next. Okay, so we talked about society being stratified. I think I'm not going to go into too much detail here. I think we kind of intuitively, right? We intuitively know that society is stratified. Some people have more power and money and status than others. I think we're okay with that. You've probably all seen something like this, so I'm going to leave that for now. This one is a little maybe more interesting or more difficult. So I want to talk to you about identity. And so if you looked it up in the dictionary, and I did, the dictionary will say something like this, is that identity is the fact of being who or what a person or a thing is, right? Or characteristics determining who or what a thing is, right? So it's the state of being, right? What is it to be me, right? What is it to be Yo-Ya, right? Things have a certain identity. And so what I would like to ask you to do is, how would you describe your identity, right? You know who you are, to some degree, I'm guessing. So what I would like you to do is take 2 minutes and write down as many characteristics of you as you can think of, okay? Descriptive words, adjectives, if you will, okay? As many descriptive words that describes your identity, okay? As many as you can. 2 minutes. Ready? Let's do it. Who are you? Who are you? Who are any of us, really? Uh-huh. And who is that me? How would we describe that me?
First,
Okay, keep going. Person's good. Okay, just a few more seconds. A few more seconds. Yeah. What are you? That's your job to figure out. It's not my place to tell you who you are. You're sleepy?
yeah.
Well, maybe right now, but as a general state of being, you're always sleepy?
No, that question is actually deeper than
It's very deep. It's very deep. Okay, but let's see what we've come up with here. Okay, so throw some words at me here. Who are you? How can we describe your identity?
Helpful,
Helpful. Okay, that's good.
time.
Kind.
active,
Active. Introverted and sorry, say it one more time.
strong,
Extrovert.
Oh,
Extrovert.
extroverted and introverted
Yeah.
at the same time.
No. Yeah. Can be a tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
But I'm introvert.
Okay. Me too, a little bit. Yeah. What else? Social.
Easy to socialize.
Easy to socialize. Okay.
People person.
A people person. Okay.
Enjoy food.
What's that?
Enjoy food.
You enjoy food? Yeah, me too. Some people here online are saying, so Ben is saying creative. That's cool. So creative, or no, outgoing. Sorry, Sean said creative. Awais, yeah, sort of social and kind of interested in other people and other cultures. Let me see. Sartaj says he's a student, right? So that's part of all of your identities right now as well, right? Reza says kind of sporty, right? Interested in sports. Says he's kind of hurried a little bit sometimes. Let's see, creative and adventurous. Yeah, Simran says ambitious. So what else do we have?
Grow mindset.
What's that?
Grow mindset.
Sorry, say again.
Grow mindset. It's
Uh,
like going up of things.
Okay. Okay, I get. Okay, sure. What else?
Sensitive.
Sorry.
Sensitive.
Sensitive. Sensitive. Good. What else? Optimistic. Optimistic. Okay, that's a good one. Sorry.
Religion identifies me.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Religion
Religion.
identifies who I am.
Okay, so yeah, you're a religious person, or you could say you're a Muslim or a Christian or a Hindu, or that's part of it as well, right? What else? Anything else? Yeah. Yeah. Outgoing.
Great.
Sorry?
Great.
Yeah. What else? Give me three more. Sorry? Okay. Okay. What else? Okay. Oh, your nationality, yeah. So Italian or wherever, yeah. Your nationality, that's good. Active, we have active here too. Okay, that's all good. So, what's the point of that, right? So again, it's a very deep question in some ways, but it's interesting when we think about our identity, because that's a lot of the things that you said are a lot of the things that we usually say, right? I'm creative, I'm outgoing, I'm friendly, I'm kind, I'm optimistic, I'm introverted, I'm extroverted. All of those things are the things that we usually say, because for the most part we're taught to think about our personal identities, right? What are the characteristics that make me me, right? What are the things that define who I am and make me separate from other people around us, right? That's what we're commonly taught to do. Before I go on, I do want to point out that what's also very interesting, or what I think is very interesting, is that when we talk about these aspects of our identity, it's really interesting to think about how many of them require other people to be around for you to be you, right? Can you be friendly if there's no one else around? Well, not really, right? Maybe can you be funny if there's no one else around? Maybe, but I guess if there's no one there to laugh with you, it's like, are you being funny or not? I don't know, right? Can you be kind or caring or compassionate if there's nobody else there? Not so much, right? So again, I always think it's interesting how much of our identity, how much of the way we define ourselves, kind of requires other people to be there, right? We have to have other people around for us to kind of be who we are, which is interesting, I think. But that's not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that for the most part, we don't often think of ourselves in terms of our social group memberships, okay? And we got a few of them there because Vittoria said nationality, right? And so nationality is part of your social group identity, right? There was another one I think that came up. What was religion, right? Basil's religion. Religion is another social group identity, right? But none of you said that you were male or men, right? None of you said that you were female or young women. Is that an important part of your identity? Yeah, I think it is, right? You're also students, right? Which most people, I think student came up online. You're students, right? You are international students, right? You all have different nationalities, different religions, right? You all have a sexuality, right? Which of course I won't ask about, but everyone has a sexuality, right? And so that's part of your identity as well. Your citizenship status is part of that as well. Your economic class, right? Are you sort of middle class or lower class or upper class, or maybe somebody's royalty here, I don't know. there's there's a whole kind of range that we often don't think about defining ourselves within, right? We usually think about our personal characteristics. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. That's good, right? Our society kind of teaches us to define ourselves that way, and we should. But for the purpose of this course, it's also important to pay attention to group memberships, because the group membership part of our identity, that's what kind of has an effect on sort of social justice issues. Okay, so the fact that I am a white male living in Canada, right, is going to make it very difficult or very different. I'm going to have a very different experience from, say, a black woman living in Canada, right? That's a different experience, right? And so, I'm a unique person. This black woman that I'm talking about, she's a unique person, but our social group identities are going to have an effect on how society treats us and on how we view society, okay? And that's what I'm talking about when I talk about positionality. That's what that term is going to mean. So positionality is all about understanding your, this isn't going to sound quite right, kind of your position in society. And I don't necessarily mean in a stratified sense. I don't mean necessarily who's on top and who's on the bottom, but in another way I kind of do. What I'm talking about here is your position in society. So the group memberships that you belong to have an influence on how you experience the world around you, the society you live in, okay? And so, again, for me to walk down a street in Vancouver, a white, male, that hurts to say, middle-aged person with kind of a Christian background, I'm a Canadian citizen, I'm an English speaker, that's a very different experience than, let's say, I don't know, a Muslim woman walking down the street, right? Maybe she's recently arrived from another country. Maybe English is her second or third language, so she's not really strong in it, right? That's a totally different experience for her walking down the street as it will be for me, right? She's going to experience and see the world differently than I will, right? And not only that, and we'll get to this a little bit later too, but society is going to see her differently as well, right? They're going to treat me differently than they treat her. And well, I was going to say they shouldn't. Maybe they should, but maybe we'll get to that later too. But society treats people different based on those social categories, right? And therefore, you experience the world differently based on those social categories too. So again, just like Victoria is sitting in the back of the class there, she is seeing this class from a certain perspective. And she's seeing the class from a certain perspective, and she's seeing it in a way that she sees things that I don't, right? And so, Victoria, you can clearly see the screen behind me, can you not? Yes. But I can't, right? If I don't turn around, I don't even know it's there, right? But you see something very clearly from where you sit that I can't see from where I sit, okay? And that's the kind of the idea behind positionality, is that depending on the social groups you belong to, you may see things that others don't, right? And particularly if you belong to, and we'll get to this terminology in a minute, a minoritized group, so a group that doesn't have social power. You are going to see things in society that the dominant group, the people who have power, do not necessarily see, okay? And so it's important for us to remember that, again, we experience the world differently depending on who we are, okay? And so everyone's experience of society, of an event, of this class, of anything, everyone's always going to have a little bit of a different experience of it. And so it's important for us to remember that, right? Because not everyone is going to perceive something the same way that we do. Cool so far? Want to take a little break? Yeah, me too. My voice is always weak at the beginning of the term because I haven't talked that much in a few weeks. But let's take a break. We'll come back in 10 minutes and then we'll talk a little bit more about this, okay? Okay, and we're back. So, we were introducing this concept of positionality, right? The idea that who you are in society kind of influences the way you perceive it, the way you experience it, and the way you understand it. And again, when I say who you are, I mean who you are in terms of the social groups that you belong to, not so much your kind of individual personality, right? That's kind of a different thing. And again, in this class, that's a lot of what we'll be concerned with. We will be paying attention to the social groups that people belong to, more so than their kind of individual characteristics, right? So yeah, again, think about it this way. If you woke up tomorrow and you walked to the mirror, to your bathroom mirror, and you looked, and suddenly you had become The Rock, or you had become Rihanna, people would treat you differently, would they not? Yeah, of course they would, right? Because we do treat people differently depending on their gender, their sexuality, their age, their social status, right? The Rock has a huge amount of social status. I have not that much, right? We treat people differently based on their level of physical attractiveness, right? Do you think people fall all over themselves to do whatever Rihanna wants them to do? Probably. What's that? Yeah, they do, right? Do you think when The Rock walks into a place, people are like, "Oh, Mr. Johnson, let me help you with that," and they're all nice to him? Of course they are, right? Because we treat people differently, right? And again, I'm not necessarily saying that that's good or bad or right or wrong at the moment. I'm just saying that's just true, right? And again, if it works for The Rock and if it works for Rihanna, it works for everyone else, right? Everyone is treated differently based on how people perceive them to be, right? So, yeah, I think I've made my point here. Society treats us differently based on the sort of social categories that we belong to: our gender, our age, our appearance, right? Our race, our ethnicity. We'll talk about those two things later. Our religious affiliation, if people can tell what religion we are. Our mental and physical ability, our social or our economic class, and our nationality or our citizenship status or our language ability. So again, this is something that's a little bit contrary to what we've been taught, and lots of times people will try to convince us, well, we shouldn't pay attention to those differences, right? We should really look at, what unites us, right? Well, how are people the same? Not how are people different, right? We shouldn't focus on, the fact that this person is black and this person is white and this person is gay and this person is not, and we're all people, right? Let's just not pay attention to the differences. And again, there's some truth and some value to that idea, right? We should pay attention to, we should try to treat people the same, right? We should try to pay attention to the things that make us the same and the things that unite us, rather than where the lines are between, you're different from me, right? And that's a good thing, right? We should try to do that. But when we're talking about social justice and we're talking about how to rectify or fix inequalities in society, these are the things we have to pay attention to, right? We have to pay attention to group memberships. So again, it's a good idea to pay attention to people's individual characteristics. It's a good idea to focus on what makes people the same, right? How are people similar to us? How are they like us? It's a good idea to do that. But for this course, we're going to pay attention to how people are different, right? Because that's what, sometimes that's what influences inequalities in society, right? Here's the other thing I wanted to talk about. So, sometimes knowledge is counterintuitive, right? And so, Again, things that are intuitive are kind of things that are common sense, things that we very easily understand or figure out, things that kind of everybody knows, right? Those are intuitive. But sometimes knowledge can be counterintuitive. Things are not the way they seem, or the way that things, it's common sense that it should be this way, but somehow it's not, right? Those things are counterintuitive. So, here is an example for you. Anything wrong with that? Everything's wrong with that? Yeah, the earth as a pizza pie, right? So that's clearly wrong, right? We all recognize that this is not correct. The earth is in fact a sphere, an orb, if you will. This sort of flat earth is just not the way it is, right? Now, of course, we all recognize how ridiculous this is, although there are people floating around that still believe that this is the case. They believe that the earth is flat. It's all a government conspiracy. You know, the round earth, no, that's just a hoax. You know, computer-generated imagery. The earth is flat. There are people who believe this. But I think most of us in this room know this is ridiculous. However, how do we know that the earth is not that way? How do we know that the earth is not flat? What's that? How? When they flew to space. Did you fly to space? Okay. There's pictures. Okay. Videos. Nicole, how do we know this is not right?
I think we're not sure, but we still be educated that way.
Yeah. We have been taught that this is not the way the world is, right? We have been taught that the earth is round. We've seen pictures, right? There's very, pretty amazing images of looking at the planet from space, right? Very, we know that things are in orbit around the planet, right? We know that is happening. We've seen images, but nobody's going to be able to hear me. I'm going to the window. But when I look out the window, it looks pretty flat. Does it not? It looks flat when I look out the window, right? If I go outside with a basketball and I put it on the ground, will it roll away to the other side of the planet? No, it's just going to sit there, right? So we know the earth is round, right? We know that it is a sphere, and yet we do not experience the world that way, do we? We kind of experience it as flat, right? When I walk along it, it feels flat. When I look out the window, looks flat, right? When I put a ball on the ground, it doesn't roll away. It just sits there, right? So even though we experience the world as flat, it feels this way. We know that that's actually counterintuitive. It's not that way, right? And so, again, people, hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, were able to figure out that the earth was round by some careful observation, right? So, yes, you could fly all the way to space and see that the earth is round. You could also climb a mountain, right? And if you can climb a high enough mountain, you might actually be able to see the horizon kind of curving a little bit on the edge. You can sometimes see this if you're in a plane too, right? If you look out the window, sometimes you can get the slight perception that there's a bit of a curve there, right? If you go to English Bay, so if you go to like Stanley Park, has anyone been to Stanley Park yet? Watch out for the coyotes. I don't know why there's coyotes biting people all the time, but what's that? The coyotes did? Oh yeah? Yeah. What's that?
They don't attack.
Well, sometimes they do. Sometimes they do.
It's a group.
They've attacked people in Stanley Park. So just be careful. Normally I would have said that too. Before I would have said, oh, coyotes, they'll leave you alone, but sometimes they won't, so be careful. But if you go to Stanley Park and you watch, if you could, well, actually you'd have to go a little further, but if you went to the other side of Vancouver Island and you watched a ship sailing away, would you be able to watch it sail all the way to Japan? No, what would happen? Yeah, it'll start to go below the horizon, right? You'll start to see it kind of like disappear, right? And again, that's evidence that the Earth is round. It's starting to go over the edge and around the curve, right? So if you observe carefully, you can see evidence that, in fact, the world is round, right? But it doesn't feel that way, right? It feels flat. We just know that it's not. So that's kind of one area in which knowledge is counterintuitive, right? So our intuition might tell us that the Earth is flat because that's how we experience it, but science tells us otherwise, right? And we believe the science, I think, for the most part. We believe that the Earth is actually round. And so, again, I've just listed these points here. Again, even though we know it to be true, we experience something else. And that's where the counterintuitive stuff comes in. It seems flat. Well, I'm talking about this flat Earth thing for this reason, because when we look at society, and that's really what we're studying here in this class, is how societies work, sometimes, again, our perceptions can be counterintuitive. And so sometimes the way that things feel aren't actually the way that things are, okay? And again, that can have a lot to do with what we've been taught, right? So we can be taught things that conflict with our experience, just like the flat Earth sort of idea. But again, society will feel different to different people, right? Different people will experience different realities. And so let me give you some examples here. These are some things that people often say, and they are, in a way, they're kind of intuitive statements, right? They're things that we've heard from people before, things that people say, things that maybe you have said. I have definitely said probably almost all of the things on this list at one time or another. These are things that seem common sense. They seem intuitive. And to some degree there is some truth to them. But the truth is actually in some cases it's counterintuitive. It's not what we think, right? And so here, people will say, well, people should be judged by what they do, not by the color of their skin. Yes, they should, but sadly, they are not, right? So just because something should be some way doesn't mean that that's the way it is, right? I accept people for who they are. Maybe, maybe. I will try to demonstrate to you that sometimes these statements, even though we might want to believe them about ourselves, we should not, okay? I see people as individuals. Yes, but also no, okay? And I'll try to show you this as well. Our culture and our socialization has a powerful effect on how we see others. And a lot of how whether we accept people or whether we don't accept them, about how we perceive them, about how we treat them, a lot of it happens in our subconscious mind. It happens really without us thinking about it or making decisions about it. And so, again, you might think that you see people as individuals and accept them for who they are, but maybe you do and maybe you don't, right? And so I'll try to show you a little bit. I'll try to enlighten us a little bit on that too. It's focusing on difference that divides us, right? So I talked about that a few minutes ago. The idea that, yeah, why are we focusing on race and gender and sexuality so much? Why can't we just all be people, right? And again, it's a nice idea, and it's something we should strive for. But when we're trying to fix inequalities, we should pay attention to the differences, right? Because again, focusing on difference is one thing, but walking down the street in Canada as a Muslim woman is a different experience than as a white man, right? And so I'm not trying to focus on the difference. I'm trying to understand that these two experiences are in fact different, right? My parents taught me that all people are equal. Fantastic, right? Good job, parents. It's true. All people are equal. But does society treat them equally? No, they don't, right? And so, again, it's nice that your parents taught you that, but it doesn't reflect how society is, and it doesn't reflect how people actually act. I won't go through all of these here because all of them are kind of, they're oversimplifications, or they're generalizations, or they have a grain of truth, but they're not entirely correct. When you read these, has anyone said these things? I'll put my hand up. I have. I've said them. Yeah, and I always treat everyone the same. No, you don't. Do you treat your grandmother or your grandfather the same as just anyone on the street? Of course not, right? We don't treat everyone the same. We treat them differently, right? Sometimes that's good, and sometimes maybe not so much. I've been discriminated against, so I don't have any privilege. We'll get to discrimination and privilege a little bit later. Our generation is more open-minded. I think every generation thinks that, although it's probably true, right, with younger generations anyway. All of these are kind of overgeneralizations, oversimplifications, or they're just not correct, right? And so, but again, lots of them are intuitive, right? They feel like they should be right? They feel like they should be the way that we are operating, right? So again, just like the idea of the round earth is somewhat counterintuitive because it's not how we experience society, some aspects of social justice also seem counterintuitive because they don't feel like they should be correct. They don't feel like they should be right. Okay. Let me just see what okay. So maybe this is the last thing I'll say today, and I'll leave it here. One of the ways in which you might see this happening might be with people like me, white men. Okay. So let me ask you a question. Is there racism in Canada? There absolutely is, right? There absolutely is. I'm not happy to admit that, right? I would prefer to be able to tell you that no, we're all good here, but it's not true. There is racism in Canada, but would you say it's directed at me? No, right? No, it's not. Racism in Canada is not directed at white people, right? So I don't experience that racism. It's not pointing at me. It's not directed at me. So, do you think I see a lot of racism or experience a lot of it? No. Would it be easy for me to just kind of ignore racism altogether? Yeah. Could I even go so far as to believe that, well, no, we don't have any problem with racism in Canada? I don't see any. Is that possible? Yeah, right? It would be very possible for me to believe that because, again, I'm not experiencing it, right? So just like the screen behind me, it would be very easy for me to say, yeah, there's no screen. I don't see any screen, right? And Victoria's looking at it, you're all looking at it and saying, dude, it's right there. It's right behind you. It's huge, right? But I don't see it, right? And so it would be very easy for me to believe that it doesn't exist. But of course it does, And so this is kind of one way in which this counterintuitive thing can work, right? And so, again, depending on who you are, you will have a different experience of society. And because you do, it's important for us to listen to all perspectives, right? So again, last thing I'll say, I know I said that a minute ago. Here's an eyeglass case for my glasses. How many sides of the eyeglass case do you see? 0? Well, you see the front, right? Yeah. Okay. So you see 1, right? Nicole sees, and kind of that, right? And then Malika, you see this and probably this, right? And so I can see the back. So the idea here is that we all have a different view of this thing, right? Of this issue. But if we actually listen to everyone's perspective, then we see more of the problem, right? We see the whole thing. But if I just assume, well, no, guys, there's only one side to this issue, and I'm the one who's seeing the right version. Is that true? No, right? Because there's things that I can't see. And so, again, we have to...
Number 6 and 9.
What's that?
It's like the number 6 and 9.
How so?
So the expanding over the 6, you don't see what the 6. If you hold it, you don't see the 9.
Ah, okay. Yeah. So, yeah, where you stand determines what you can see, right? And so, again, it's easy to assume that certain things aren't happening when you don't see them. It's easy for me to assume that there's no screen here, even though there clearly is one. And again, not all of us can see the entire picture of society, right? That's why we have to listen to the voices of multiple people, right? Because some people see things that we don't see, right? And in fact, we'll get to this a little bit later, but as a member of a lot of the dominant groups, right, the groups that have power, I actually see the least. So people in minoritized groups tend to have a broader view of what's going on. And so, but often we listen to them the least. Okay. All right, that is a lot. I didn't really mean to go that far today, but that's okay. Do you have any questions about what we've talked about so far? Did anything not make sense or sound super confusing or bizarre or... Okay. The last thing I'm going to do here before I let you go, I'm not going to talk anymore, but I'm just going to try something here. Ah, good. So, does that work? Sorry, I'm just trying to see if something... Okay, so if you go to online people and people in class, if you go to Microsoft Teams, you'll see I've just got a little... It says it's an assignment, but it's not. It's just a little question I want you to answer. It's just something I'm trying to sort of gauge people's understanding. And so in Microsoft Teams, in the social justice channel, under assignments, I've just made a very quick one for today, and it's just one question. And I just want you to answer it as best you can in your own words. Okay? That's all you have to do. It's very simple, and it should be easy to see, okay? Nicole, I saw you on your phone there. Do you see it? It's there? Okay. So all I want you to do is answer that question in your own words. It's not, it's not for marks, so don't panic about it. Just do your best. I just want to hear what you have to say at this point. Okay? So that's all I have for you today. I will let you go. I hope you have a nice afternoon. Tomorrow we'll talk a little bit more about this stuff, and about stories and things like that, and knowledge. Yeah, and for your answer in that little question, maybe like a 2 or 3 sentences or something. You don't have to go on forever and ever, but yeah, don't panic about it. I just want to hear what you have to say. Okay? That is it. Have a nice afternoon. I'll see you guys tomorrow, okay?
Because